For 6 long years, I stood by Jonathan. King gave him the best of my youth, loved him with the kind of devotion that stripped me down to nothing, and yet I never once saw the day when he would make me his wife. On the night everything ended, I was cornered in a narrow alley in downtown Los Angeles by 2 men whose eyes carried the kind of violence that never needed words. My hands shook as I dialed Jonathan, desperate for him to hear the fear in my breath, desperate for him to save me the way a man saves the woman he claims to love. The phone rang, and when his voice came through, it was as if the ground beneath me vanished. He said she is just my assistant, Hannah, and in this foreign city she feels like someone is following her. It is dangerous. I need to be with her. His voice was cold, detached, heavy with irritation, as if my call had pulled him away from something that truly mattered. He added that for years I had made him suffocate, that I should stop clinging. That when we returned home, he would marry me as if marriage was a chore to silence me. Then he hung up, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. The world tilted, my chest collapsed in despair, and in the darkness of that alley I was dragged down. I fought, I begged, I clawed for another chance to breathe, but my final breath came soaked in terror and betrayal. I died in a place where no one knew my name, abandoned by the man who once swore he loved me. When I opened my eyes again, the heat of an Arizona summer scorched my skin. The sound of engines roared in my ears, and I realized I was standing 6 years earlier on the edge of a racetrack outside Tucson. My heart slammed against my ribs as I saw him, Jonathan King, at 19. The boy who once carried his confidence like fire, whose face was sharp with arrogance and youth, whose amber eyes burned so intensely it was impossible not to drown in them. He stood there sweaty, wild, shouting over the noise, "Hannah Brooks. I love you, you said. If I win this race, you will be mine." I froze, tears stinging my eyes, because I had truly returned to the very beginning, to the moment where everything between us first took root. It had been years since I saw that fiery gaze. My memories of him were full of the cold indifference of later days. His bored tone telling me not to cause trouble, his touch absent even as he held me. But here this Jonathan was different, burning, reckless, alive. I told him that if he could defeat me, if he could take the title from me in a real race, then I would stay by his side. He drove like a man possessed, throwing his life into the curve that could kill him, his tires screaming against the asphalt as if his heart itself had been strapped to the wheel. He won by inches, and when I crossed the finish line behind him, I collapsed against his chest. Tears streaming uncontrollably, grief and love tangled into one unbearable knot. In front of the crowd, he pulled me into a kiss that was raw, feral, unapologetic. And that was how it all began. The endless years of passion and pain. Jonathan loved me with a fever that terrified even his friends. When someone insulted me with the cruel words of a stranger, saying I was nothing more than a girl without guidance, he broke the man's teeth without hesitation. When I loved racing, he bled for it, falling off bikes, crashing cars, breaking skin and bones, but always getting back up because it gave him a reason to talk to me. Once I coughed from cigarette smoke and he crushed his pack in front of me, never touching it again, forbidding anyone around him to smoke near me. People whispered that they had never seen him love like this, and everyone assumed that the title Mrs. King was already mine. I believed it too. I thought we were unshakable, that forever was already written for us. But I was wrong. By the 5th year, something inside us had rotted. Jonathan no longer came home early. His clothes carried the faint trace of smoke and strange perfume, and when I asked, he smiled with tired gentleness, telling me that men in business had no choice but to drink, to smoke, to entertain. When I pressed about marriage, his eyes darkened as if I were pushing him into a corner. I threatened to leave, but he returned with gifts and sleepless eyes, begging me with the kind of desperation that made me weak again. He said he loved me more than his life, that he could not survive without me, but marriage could wait until his career was stronger. The sweetness of our first years washed over me like a tide, and once more, I surrendered, once more, I forgave. That forgiveness was my biggest mistake, because he fell for someone else. Her name was Melissa Evans, a girl crushed under her father's gambling debts, sold to a man old enough to be her grandfather. Jonathan found her in a bar, trembling, desperate, and he pulled her out of that hell with promises of safety. She became his assistant, clumsy and ignorant at first, but he stayed late at the office to guide her, to teach her, to shape her into something useful. He told me nothing never mentioned the late nights, the business trips where she alone accompanied him. I discovered them together at a racing banquet, laughter spilling between them, the way he leaned toward her as if her every word mattered. When a man touched her inappropriately, Jonathan's fury erupted like a storm, his fists pounding the man until blood stained his knuckles. He held her trembling frame against his chest, whispering softly, "Do not be afraid, I am here." She tilted her face toward him, eyes wet, voice breaking. "Will you protect me forever?" He said nothing, only tightened his arms around her. But when his gaze lifted across the room and found mine, the truth sliced through me. His silence was the loudest confession of all. My hands clenched so tightly I tasted blood in my throat. My heart split open, torn by the sight of him fighting like a madman for another woman. When once upon a time, I had believed I was the only one who could stir such fury in him. Jonathan King, the boy who once kissed me under the scorching sun of Tucson and vowed he would risk everything to win me, had already begun to shift his fire, no longer mine to hold. And as I watched him cradle Melissa Evans, I realized the seeds of my destruction had already been planted. Melissa Evans collapsed into Jonathan King's arms, her voice trembling with a sweetness that made my stomach turn. "You will protect me for the rest of my life, won't you?" He did not answer. He only held her tighter, silent, as if his silence spoke louder than any promise, and in that moment his eyes lifted and met mine. At the end of the hallway, my hands clenched so hard the taste of iron rose in my throat. My heart convulsed, ripping apart piece by piece as the truth cut through me. He could rage like a wild beast for another woman. He could bleed and fight for someone who was not me. From the very first glance, maybe he had already felt something special for her. Jonathan was never the kind of man who gave into pity. He wore the face of an angel, but inside he carried the heart of a ruthless god, the kind who could break a man's fingers one by one without so much as a change in expression. I turned away, my heels striking the floor with fury, and stormed toward my car. The night swallowed me as I slammed the door and pressed the accelerator to the floor. The engine roared, the street blurred. My tears burned my vision. Behind me, headlights flared. Jonathan's car swerved into my lane, cutting me off, forcing me to brake so violently that my body slammed forward against the wheel. His car skidded, nearly flipping metal, groaning against asphalt, and for a terrifying second, I thought I had killed him. My hands shook uncontrollably as I stopped my body. Weak, trembling, my lungs aching for air. He stepped out shaken but alive, and walked toward me with the same maddening calm that had once seduced me. "Hannah," he said, "I had to bring her. She is under my responsibility. I must keep her safe." His words stabbed deeper than any blade. Then he pulled out a ring, slipped it onto my finger as if that could mend the wound. "I had planned to propose after this contract," he said, "to make it grand, but now there is no surprise left." My breath caught. A ring I had begged for, dreamt of, prayed for, was forced onto my hand in the middle of a fight over another woman. But before I could process, his phone rang. Melissa's frightened voice cracked through the receiver. "Jonathan, someone is following me. I think we crossed the wrong man. What if this is revenge?" He froze for only a second before cutting the call and looking at me with eyes already far away. "I have to go. Get back to the hotel on your own." Then he drove off, leaving nothing but smoke in my face. I stood abandoned in the street until my phone buzzed. A message from Melissa lit the screen. Attached was a photo of the very ring on my finger. She wrote that a client had rejected it months ago, had it exchanged for a necklace instead. The ring Jonathan had just used to pledge his forever had been nothing more than leftover merchandise, a lie dressed as a promise. I asked her if she was not supposed to be in danger. She replied quickly, "He came to rescue me, didn't he? Did you really think 6 years together could bind him? I just wanted to test him, and when he held me, I heard his heart pounding so wildly. He has already fallen not once but many times. He told me he has been tired of you for a long time. She promised she would tell me more, but I never had the chance to respond. Rough hands grabbed me from behind. A cloth silenced my scream, and I was dragged into a dark alley. 2 foreign men demanded everything valuable I carried. After stripping me of my possessions, they exchanged glances that froze my blood, and one reached for my clothes. I kicked bit-clawed desperate, and my fingers brushed my phone. I hit the emergency dial, praying to God anyone would pick up. A voice answered familiar, all the last voice I wanted to hear. It was Jonathan. She is just my assistant, he said again. In this foreign place, she thinks she is being followed. It is dangerous. You exhaust me, Hannah. Fine, when we get back, I will marry you. Then he ended the call. The silence pressed down like a grave. One man pinned me, the other ripped at my dress. I bit down so hard I tasted blood kicked with every ounce of strength I had left. They cursed, snarled, and a blade flashed under the streetlight. Cold steel kissed my throat, then sliced, and warmth burst out of me in a river I could not stop. I died there on filthy concrete with terror in my eyes and loneliness in my chest, abandoned and humiliated. But when I opened my eyes again, the sun was bright, the air sharp with gasoline, and desert dust, the sound of engines rattling the ground. I was back on the starting line 6 years earlier. Jonathan King, 19 and cocky, stood grinning in the sun, the crowd chanting his name. His eyes locked on mine with a fire I had once thought would never burn out. Hannah Brooks, he shouted, if I win, you will be mine forever. My lips curled, but my heart was stone. This time, no matter what, I would not soften, I would not yield. Even if it meant dying on that track, I would never let him claim victory over me again. His smile faltered, confusion flickered across his face. The cheers around us dimmed, and I tightened my grip on the wheel, my veins filled with ice. The race began, and for the first time in my life, I was not racing for him. I was racing to destroy him. I lowered the visor of my helmet and fixed my eyes on the strip of asphalt shimmering under the Arizona sun. One thought pulsed through me like a drumbeat I had to win. I could not let myself fall into the same mistake. I would not let Jonathan King wrap me in his lies again. The gunshot echoed and my body jolted as if released from a bowstring. I shot forward, the roar of the engine devouring the cheers, Jonathan's car tightening to my left. His presence pressing against me like a curse I could not shake. The road narrowed into a vicious curve that only one could take. In the last life I had eased off, unwilling to risk him, unwilling to hurt him. This time my heart was cold, my grip unrelenting. I pressed the accelerator until the wind screamed. Gasoline burned in my veins, the desert blurred the crowd's horrified shouts, twisted with the rush of speed. She's insane, they must have thought. She doesn't care if she dies. And they were right. I cared only about cutting him out of my fate. At the cliff bend, I held the wheel steady, trusting nothing but instinct. Jonathan flinched, pulled back his car, spinning into the barrier, metal tearing and sparks scattering, while mine shot forward into open air, free, untouchable. The finish line split open in front of me, and I crossed it, victory searing my lungs with each breath. I stepped out, trophy gleaming in my hands. While behind me, Jonathan stumbled from the wreckage, his shoulder hanging heavy with pain. His car destroyed, but his eyes clinging to me like shackles. I looked at him with all the frost in my soul, lifted my hand, raised my middle finger, and walked away with the cup as if he had never existed. His footsteps staggered after me, his hand grabbing my arm with a desperation that made the crowd whisper, "Hannah, do you hate me so much that you would risk your life on that curve just to cut me out? We are meant to be together." His voice cracked, but I laughed cruel and sharp, shaking him off like dirt. "Who do you think you are? Just because you chased me, I had to surrender. You lost. Stop clinging. You're pathetic." His face drained of color, humiliation tightening his jaw. Never in his life had the heir of the King family been rejected so mercilessly. Never had a girl humiliated him in front of everyone. Rage and shame twisted him, and his teeth ground against the words, "Hannah Brooks, you will regret this." I met his fury with a smile colder than the desert night, and answered with 2 words, "Never again." Then I climbed into my car, and disappeared into the mountain curves, the wind slapping my face as shards of memory sliced through me. Regret did not follow me. The only regret I carried was ever loving him in the first place. Not even 7 years had passed before he betrayed me, before he let another woman go crawl into the space I had bled to hold. Love was not strong enough to survive time and temptation. That was the truth I had carved into my skin. I met Jonathan for the first time years earlier at my father's birthday gala, a night when I was reckless enough to spit in the face of my family's polished image. I wanted nothing more than to ruin him, to remind him of the woman he had driven into a grave. In front of the glittering crowd, I switched out the gift. My stepmother had chosen a luxury watch, worth more than most houses, for a green cap, the universal symbol of betrayal. I smiled at my father with acid in my tone and said, "Dad, this suits you perfectly." His rage flared, the glass in his hand flying at my head. Blood trickled down my forehead, but I only smiled wider, meeting his stare without a flinch. "Don't worry," I told him, "the real gift is still waiting." That night, I exposed my stepmother for what she was. Once a starlet, she had built her career and her survival on her body, and I laid bare the evidence in front of the entire hall. Video after video, man after man, enough to drown the room in disgust. My father's face turned a sickly shade, the cap on his head more fitting than any jewel. My stepmother screamed and lunged at me, hand raised to slap, but I caught her wrist and struck back in front of everyone. She was the woman who had destroyed my family, the one who lured my father into divorcing my mother, who sent recordings of their affairs to humiliate her, mocking that she had grown old, that she could not keep her husband. My father, once childhood sweethearts, with my mother, sneered that she was boring, unwanted. And when my stepmother waved an ultrasound in her face, claiming pregnancy, he gave her 35% of the company and forced my mother to leave. My mother could not bear it. Depression swallowed her until one day she stepped off a ledge and ended everything. Not long after, he married the mistress, openly raising her to the position of wife. At first she feigned kindness to me, but soon her cruelty was clear. She starved me, beat me, left bruises hidden where no one could see. I carried those marks alone. But retribution has a way of finding its target. At another gala, she was shoved by a rival actress and lost the only child she would ever carry. The doctors told her she would never conceive again. I stood in that hall with blood drying on my forehead, watching my father and his wife writhe under the weight of their sins, and I knew I had struck where it hurt most. The room buzzed with scandal whispers, slicing through the music cameras flashing as if the walls themselves wanted to immortalize their disgrace. In the shadows, Jonathan King's amber eyes found me gleaming, not with pity, but with a dangerous amusement, as if he had discovered a rare jewel in the middle of chaos. And that was how he entered my story, not as a savior, not as a knight, but as a predator who recognized another creature born of fire. My father surrounded himself with women after marrying Mrs. Reed, but his health was already failing, and none of them ever gave him another child. When I turned 18, the 35% of Brooks Corporation that my mother had left me officially transferred to my name. That inheritance made me untouchable, no longer bound to bow my head to a man who had once called himself my father. He spat words of rage at me, telling me to get out, to leave his house. I might have walked away for good if it were not for my determination to hold on to what my mother had bled for. As I turned my back on him, Mrs. Reed lunged with a knife, wild eyes flashing in the chandelier light, ready to end me in front of everyone. She had truly gone mad. In that instant, Jonathan King appeared, kicking the knife from her hand and throwing her to the ground. He pulled me into his arms while security swarmed and dragged her away, her screams echoing through the grand hall as the guests stared in disbelief. For the first time, she had no escape. Prison awaited her. When I looked up, I found Jonathan's amber eyes fixed on me not with pity, but with a glimmer of fascination as though he had just discovered something rare and precious. I had thought the party would be dull, another performance of power and wealth, but in that moment he tilted his head and smiled. "You are interesting," he said. "What is your name?" He was handsome too, handsome, his presence wrapped in the effortless confidence of privilege. He had saved me, and no matter how defiant I was, I could not ignore him. "Hannah Brooks," I said flatly. He repeated my name with a small smile, savoring it like a secret. Hannah Brooks, like a summer wind stirring restless hearts. I laughed bitter, calling him a wanderer, a charming drifter. "If you are such a wanderer," I told him, "then pay with your body. Unfortunately, I am not interested in men. My father is proof enough of their worthlessness." Jonathan smirked, unshaken. "Then let it be known, Hannah Brooks, that I will be your future boyfriend." That was the beginning. After the gala, Jonathan showed up at my school. When he learned I loved racing, he started learning to drive himself. He crashed more than once, his right arm bandaged from a fall, and Lucas Miller, his best friend, called me to visit. Jonathan lay on the bed frustrated, scolding Lucas for telling me. "I wanted to master it and surprise her," he muttered. For the first time, my heart wavered. Until then, everyone else had warned me that racing was too dangerous, that a girl like me should not risk her life. No one had ever chosen to step into that world with me, but Jonathan did. For me, he fought. A classmate who had once tried to pursue me turned cruel when I rejected him, sneering that I was just a girl without a mother's guidance, pretending to be better than I was. The next day, Jonathan showed up with a swollen lip, Lucas, whispering that he had beaten the boy so badly he lost his teeth. After that, no one dared speak ill of me. The boy transferred schools soon after. Jonathan never hid his feelings. He once stood under the flagpole reading his confession aloud, for the entire campus to hear punished later. With lines but proud of his defiance, he held up the paper like a trophy and told me, "This is proof of my love." Girls lined up to confess to him, but he turned them away with one answer. "I already love someone. Her name is Hannah Brooks." He spent nights searching for roasted sweet potatoes in the cold, clutching them to his chest so that when he placed one in my hands, it was still warm from his body. Each day he asked if I had changed my mind, if he could finally be my boyfriend. By then, the story of Jonathan King chasing Hannah Brooks had spread like wildfire, and everyone knew he loved me openly, brazenly, without shame. Day by day, his persistence chipped at my defenses until I could not stop myself from falling. That was why I agreed to a wager. If he won the next race, I would accept him. That night, when I could have won, I deliberately slowed, letting him take the victory. That choice sealed my fate, giving him the chance to wound me deeper than anyone else ever could. In this life, things were different. I encountered Melissa Evans 5 years earlier than before. She entered our class with an air of humility wrapped in confidence, praised for her stellar academic record, dressed plainly, but carrying herself as though the world owed her nothing and everything at once. When our eyes met, I glimpsed something unsettling, a flash of resentment and defiance so sharp it raised the hairs on my arms. By rights, she and I were strangers, but there was something in her gaze that whispered of knowledge, of memory, as if she too had walked this path before. The thought unsettled me, but before I could make sense of it, she was at Jonathan's side, her presence like a shadow slipping between us. She approached him with studied innocence, asking questions, leaning too close, laughing too softly. And though I kept my face calm, my eyes followed them a moment too long. Jonathan saw it, mistook it, and in his arrogance, he smiled as if to remind me that I was not the only one who could stir his heart. He began to bring her breakfast, something once reserved for me alone. He took the water bottle from her hands on the basketball court, smiling down at her as though she had given him gold. He let her sit beside him in class, told her she could ask him anything, no matter how small. He wanted me to see, to feel the knife twist, to know that he could choose another. In the past, I might have raged, might have lost myself in jealousy. This time I stayed silent, but the ice inside me thickened. Jonathan mistook the flicker of my gaze for jealousy. He wanted me to see to believe I was no longer the center of his world, so he played his game openly. He brought Melissa Evans breakfast, something that once belonged only to me. On the basketball court, he took her water bottle and smiled down at her, as though she had handed him the sun. In class, he let her sit beside him, telling her she could ask him anything she did not understand. Every gesture was a dagger, a reminder meant to humble me, to tell me I was not the only one. Once I might have broken under it, once I might have raged with jealousy. But now I only watched with a steady calm. Even when I had carried dinner to his office in the past, afraid he would work through the night without food, I had walked in to find him bent over Melissa. Their heads so close it made my stomach turn. She stared up at him with practiced vulnerability, and he laughed softly. Patient, kind, his voice the same tone he had once saved only for me. "Why are you so confused, Melissa? Let me explain it again." My eyes stung because it had been so long since he had looked at me that way. He had promised once that he would only teach me, only share that gentleness with me, and yet here he was giving it away. I stood in the doorway and asked coldly what they thought they were doing. My eyes sliced toward Melissa like knives. "The company hired you to work, not to seduce your boss." Her face crumpled, eyes shining with tears. "Please don't misunderstand," she stammered. "Mr. King was only helping me with a presentation. Check my computer if you like." Jonathan's gaze shifted cold and flat, and he told me not to cause a scene. Everyone else had left, he said, only they remained to finish the project. I snapped that if she was so incompetent, she should not be kept. Melissa broke down, begging me not to cost her the job, sobbing that if she were fired, her father would lose control and hurt her again. Jonathan frowned, pulling me aside, his voice low. "Hannah, why must you be so cruel?" He dragged me from the room, and that night, for the first time, we fought because of Melissa Evans. I told him a woman's intuition never lies, that she was not as helpless as she pretended. He said I was imagining things, blinded by jealousy. At last he relented, promising that from then on, a secretary would guide her, and swore he was only helping with work. He even showed me the security footage as proof. But looking back now, none of it stirred me. I closed my book, rose, and walked away. Behind me I heard the slam of a desk, Jonathan's voice snapping with fury. "Get out, Melissa, stop following me. If you don't understand, ask your teachers. I don't owe you anything. You were given a free ride here, and you still cannot manage simple tasks. Who do you think you are?" And still I wondered, how could he be so blind in the life before? How could he spend years by my side and never see through her games? Melissa caught me in the restroom later, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Hello, Hannah." I didn't answer, tried to leave, but she blocked the door with her arm. "Don't pretend you don't know me. The way you looked at me when we first met, that was not how you look at a stranger. You've come back too, haven't you?" Her smile widened. "In the last life you lost to me, and in this one you will lose again. You will watch him leave you for me." Her voice was dripping with triumph as she recounted the past, telling me how she had cried about her father hitting her, how Jonathan had rushed to her house, beaten the man, bloody forced him to sign a promise never to hurt her again, and handed him money to ensure her safety. She told me he had returned to me afterward with bruised hands, lying that it was business troubles. She reminded me of the night of our 6th anniversary, when she called again saying the thunder terrified her, that her father always struck her on stormy nights, that she was feverish and alone. Jonathan had abandoned me at a candlelit table and driven to her side. He had kissed my forehead, whispered that his mother was sick, and that I should not follow him because his mother disliked me. I had believed him. I had swallowed the lie, because his mother truly had despised me, had called me wild and unworthy of their family. While I sat alone at our anniversary, he held Melissa Evans, murmuring comforts that once belonged to me. Listening to her retell it with satisfaction, I felt the weight of 100 knives pressing into my chest. Yet I did not flinch. I only watched her with calm eyes, because this time, I already knew how the story ended. On the night of our 6th anniversary, Jonathan abandoned me. Melissa Evans had called him in tears, whispering that the thunder terrified her, that she was burning with fever. And Jonathan left me sitting at a candlelit table with a necklace in my hands, pressing a kiss to my forehead, as he murmured an excuse about his mother being ill. "Do not follow," he warned. "My mother does not like you." I believed him because I knew his mother despised me, because she had called me wild and unworthy ever since I ruined my father's birthday party, because I thought if I endured long enough, she would eventually accept me. So I stayed silent and obedient while he was holding another woman, whispering words of comfort into her hair. Melissa told me the story with a smile of triumph, waiting to see my pain. Even after dying once, even after learning every bitter truth, my chest still tightened with grief. But I forced my face into calm and wiped my hands slowly, leaving nothing for her to savor. "Trash remains trash," I said quietly. "If you like him, keep him. The problem is, he no longer seems interested in you either." Her smile cracked, twisting into rage. She slapped her own cheeks until they burned red, her eyes wild with venom. "Hannah Brooks, if people believe you bullied me out of jealousy, what will they say? You have never had a good reputation. No one will stand by you. You were born a loser." I stared at her, cold and moving, letting her perform her pathetic play. A second chance at life had taught me that these cheap tricks were beneath me, that no man was worth becoming a fool. But rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers claimed I was jealous that I rejected Jonathan while punishing any girl who dared come close to him. The school forum filled with accusations, students calling me fake teachers, summoning me to the office, warning me that if the press caught wind of school violence, it would stain the university's reputation. In Tucson, no one dared oppose the Brooks family openly, so it was all shadows and insinuations, but the poison was still real. I could have endured it until a local paper published a story. The article showed photos of Melissa Evans. Her arms, waist, and legs bruised, her face blurred, but her sobs clear in a video plea. She begged for help, claiming the powerful had cornered her, and she had nowhere left to run. The uproar was immediate. People who had always envied me seized the chance, flooding the forums with slander. They said I had not only bullied Melissa, but assaulted other students. They posted a photo of me mid-fight, claiming I had crippled a racer on purpose, that I had no regard for human life. Even the story of my stepmother's knife attack was twisted into proof that I was so corrupt, my own family had to control me with violence. The storm broke open. My name dragged through every corner of social media. Personal details leaked, mobs of faceless voices howling for my expulsion. "Expel her," they demanded. "Record it on her permanent file." People declared that girls like me created lifelong trauma, that I should be punished as an example. It felt as if the whole world had turned its back, the halls filled with stares dripping contempt and suspicion. Jonathan came to me then. He did not ask if I had really hurt Melissa. He did not care about truth. All he saw was the proof he wanted, that I had fought for him, that I had gone to war against another woman in his name. His hands closed around mine, his eyes lit with a twisted hope. "You care about me, don't you?" His voice trembled, desperate. I looked at him, my face calm, and said the words he never expected. "No, I never laid a hand on her." He froze his grip, slackening, confusion breaking across his features. For a moment, his eyes searched mine, as though he might find salvation there. He looked at me not as a lover, but as if I were a savior, as if my denial could wash away everything. But I held my silence and let the truth hang heavy between us. The scandal had already spread too far, Jonathan told me. And even if I denied everything, no one would believe me. He said he could crush the rumors, silence the voices. All I had to do was bend a little. I looked into his pleading eyes and gave him 3 words that cut sharper than any blade. "Not necessary." He recoiled as though I had stabbed him, his eyes red, his face stricken. "I treated you so well," he whispered. "How can you not try to love me again?" But I had tried. And the ending had been ruinous. With each passing year, his love faded, while mine only deepened, until I was drowning in an ocean he no longer swam. There had been a time when he lifted me as though I were a jewel, whispering that he counted the days until he could marry me, keep me as his forever. Yet when the day came that marriage was possible, he stopped speaking of it. Even my father, cold and distant as he was, once asked when Jonathan and I would wed, and Jonathan's answer had been nothing but a careless, "Let's wait." From a girl who had been strong and unyielding, I became fragile, sensitive, always conceding. I became a version of myself I despised. I lowered myself until I was no longer myself, hiding from the fractures in a love that could not be repaired. I told myself he would change, that he had once loved me so much that he would remember. I clung to the bright fragments of our past and used them to justify forgiveness after forgiveness, even as his betrayals burned clearer every day. In the end, all I had to show was 6 wasted years and my own life cut short. I would not let it happen again. Jonathan's eyes softened with longing, his voice steady with resolve. "I will never give up on you." Melissa Evans believed she had won, that she had pushed me out of school, but she had underestimated me. I invited every reporter I could find, prepared to face their questions head on. I gathered those connected to the stories, everyone except my stepmother, who still rotted in prison. The photograph of me striking someone was no proof of cruelty, only of self-defense. That man had tried to extort money from me, and I fought back. He admitted it himself, apologizing publicly. His grandmother had been dying, he said, and he had turned to crime in desperation. I had lent him money for her treatment, and after prison, I found him work as a security guard at Brooks Corporation. He told the world he owed me gratitude, not fear. As for the racer they claimed I crippled, he stepped forward himself. "My car malfunctioned and nearly sent me over the edge of Mount Lemmon," he said, "and if not for Hannah Brooks stopping the vehicle, we both might have died." The rumor of cruelty was a lie. As for my stepmother, I did not replay the sordid videos. The students were too young for such filth. I showed instead her own letter from prison, in which she confessed to the abuse she had inflicted on me and begged me for leniency, hoping I would sign a petition to reduce her sentence. I had refused. When the truth came out, the microphone swarmed, reporters pushing closer. "What about the bullying?" they asked. "The girl is here too. Surely she should testify." Melissa Evans stood only feet away, eyes burning with hatred. I pointed at her calmly. "She is right there, you can ask her yourself." She did not miss the chance. Tears spilled instantly, her voice breaking, as she cried that she did not know what she had done wrong, that she had only asked Jonathan a question. "Is it because I am poor that I must be humiliated?" she sobbed. "Is that my crime?" Every word a trap, every tear meant to bind me, but I only stood still, my expression untouched, watching as though I had seen this play before. Because I had lived it once already and died for it. I understood now that Jonathan King's love, my jealousy, Melissa Evans's theatrics, all of it belonged to a past I had already buried. The past was something I had already buried, nothing left to regret. I unlocked my phone and pressed play, and Melissa Evans's own voice spilled out over the courtyard speakers, her words echoing in front of the cameras and the stunned crowd. "Hannah, if you bully me out of jealousy, what will people think?" she sneered. "No one will ever believe you. You were born a loser." There were no cameras in that bathroom, and the bruises on her body were her own doing. She had never imagined I would record it, never considered that at 18 I had already stolen incriminating videos of my stepmother and knew how to hide evidence. The moment she trailed me into that restroom, I had pressed record, waiting to see how far she would go. The bigger the lie grew, the harder the fall would be. And now, as her own voice played back, Melissa's body went rigid, her eyes wide with horror as tears cut down her cheeks. Before the silence could break, a man burst through the reporters. His shirt was worn thin, his hands cracked and calloused. Without a word, he struck Melissa hard across the face, the sound ringing louder than the whispers. "Ungrateful brat," he shouted. "Where have you been all these years while I rotted alone?" Melissa's eyes filled with terror, her voice trembling. "Father," the man raged, spitting venom as he ranted that her mother had abandoned her when she was 3. that Melissa carried the same coward's blood, the same instinct to run. Did she think getting into college meant she no longer needed him? He collapsed onto the ground, then sobbing, claiming he had sacrificed everything to raise her, only to be betrayed. The reporters did not intervene. They swarmed like vultures, snapping photos, their cameras devouring the scene. Melissa panicked, striking at the lenses, screaming for them to stop. The man grabbed her wrists, snarling that her grandmother was bedridden and needed her, dragging her toward the exit. Melissa fought, breaking free, and in desperation she collapsed at my feet, clutching my hand. "Please, Hannah, help me. I will not compete with you again. Do not let him take me back." I looked down on her with cool detachment. "When you filmed yourself sobbing about me bullying you, did you think of this moment? I am no saint. Why would I save you?" She broke her body, slumping, but then rose again, wild with madness, lunging at me. Jonathan King appeared before she could reach me, kicking her to the ground. Melissa's cries tore through the crowd, high and broken. Why is it like this? You promised, you told me you were tired of her, that if you had met me first, you would have chosen me." Jonathan stared down at her with nothing in his eyes, lips curling as he spoke 2 words. "Crazy girl." Melissa's screams shattered, the last shards of her pride gone, and I only stood still, my heart heavy. I did not hate her. Even if it had not been Melissa, it would have been someone else, another woman at the wrong time. She thought she was special to him, but she never understood that the only reason she felt rare was because he had not yet possessed her. I was the one etched into him, the one he could never erase. She was a shadow, a substitute, a game. The universe had given her a chance to rewrite her life, and she wasted it by chasing a man who had already proven he could destroy a woman's soul. Her father dragged her away in disgrace, reporters chasing them, until the gates capturing every humiliation. Jonathan stepped to me, then his eyes fixed on mine. "You called her father here, didn't you? That first article, that sudden exposure, it was your doing. Who else in Tucson would dare come after me?" His lips pressed tight, silence heavy. At last he spoke, his voice hoarse, trembling at the edges. "All I wanted was for you to lean on me, to yield a little, to stay by my side. Was that really so wrong? I will protect you, love you, and be your shelter forever," Jonathan whispered, his voice breaking, but my gaze was cold and steady. "You disgust me. Get out of my life." He had thrown me into the storm and now dared to play the savior. Perhaps he had never loved me at all. What he had chased was the thrill of conquest, the satisfaction of taming a wild rose and forcing it into a neat vase. His face twisted, his hands clenching until the knuckles whitened, tears streaming, as his voice turned into a raw plea. "What do I have to do to make you love me? Tell me, Hannah." This was not the arrogant Jonathan King who once commanded rooms with a glance. He was broken, degraded, unrecognizable. He had never begged anyone in his life, and here he was on the edge of collapse. I knew he loved me, but betrayal made that love as filthy as rot. I smirked, my voice dripping venom. "Go ahead and die. Maybe then I'll cry over your ashes and regret never loving you." I spun away, not looking back. I had already filed my application for an exchange program, desperate to leave Tucson and the endless cycle of Jonathan's obsession. But the day my acceptance letter arrived, I was taken. When I came to, I found myself in a decaying mansion, the air heavy with mildew and despair. Jonathan stood before me, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a ghost of the man who once burned with wild charm. His face bore the weight of obsession, his presence suffocating. I glared, my eyes brimming with nothing but hatred. He reached out, fingertips brushing my cheek, voice trembling. "Don't look at me like that, Hannah. When you look at me that way, it breaks me." Something inside me snapped. I screamed, the rage of years erupting. "Why do you keep haunting me? Haven't I made myself clear? I don't want to see you ever again. You're like a phantom clinging to me, reminding me of every bitter memory I would rather forget. I hate you." I hated him for once treating me as precious, for holding me as though I was irreplaceable, only to cast me aside for someone else. And yet, after everything, the hate had burned itself out. What remained was worse revulsion, the kind that curdles your blood. I wanted no part of him, no part of this endless spiral. I wanted freedom. I wanted life. "You're leaving Tucson, aren't you?" he said. Voice thick. "Because of me. Admit it." His eyes flickered with pain and stubbornness. "Lately I dream of us together. We were about to be married, the day was close, but then I wake up and it's gone. If it's only a dream, why does it feel so real?" "Because it was real," I said, my voice sharp. For a moment his face lit with hope, only for dread to sweep in right after. Because if he had truly seen what I had seen, then he had also seen his own betrayals. He had seen every lie, every moment he turned to Melissa Evans, every time I was left alone. He had seen me bleeding out in a dark alley while he rushed to another woman. He lowered his head, whispering, "It's all true. But I swear I never loved her. I only wanted to make you jealous. How could I ever have loved Melissa?" The memories stormed through me, scorching, undeniable. He had seen it all, and yet here he was kidnapping me, forcing me into this nightmare. "Because you are pathetic," I spat, my words searing. He winced but still held me tighter. "Curse me, call me anything, just don't leave me." His arms crushed me, my fury erupting as I bit his shoulder so hard blood filled my mouth. He trembled with pain, but didn't let go. Hot tears falling against my skin. "I only love you. I always have." With her, it was a mistake, a lapse. "I never wanted to leave you. I was going to propose, I meant it. But whenever she called, I lost control. I couldn't stop myself. I'm sorry," I spat blood onto the floor, my voice cutting like glass. "You think your words mean anything now? Jonathan King, you're worse than my father. At least he never pretended to be anything but cruel. You crawl through the filth, do unspeakable things, then lie to yourself and call it love. Your so-called love is cheaper than dirt. You promised I would never become a second version of my mother, and yet here I am watching you destroy me the same way betrayal destroyed her." He knew better than anyone that betrayal was the one thing I could never forgive. If he had had the courage to tell me he no longer loved me, I would not have wasted 6 years of my life clinging to him. His eyes were bloodshot, his face streaked with tears, and his hands dug into my shoulders, as if I were the last rope keeping him from drowning. "I only made the kind of mistake any man could make," he pleaded, voice cracking. "But this time, Hannah, this time, I haven't done anything wrong." His words fell flat, heavy, and meaningless. Love can never be an excuse for betrayal, and it can never be used to trap someone who is already gone. I had died once before, bled out in a cold alley, and if death had taught me anything, it was that letting go was the only way to truly live. He had told me once that when I died in that past life, he spiraled into ruin. He drowned himself in whiskey, drove his company into bankruptcy, and when stomach cancer took hold, he followed me into the grave less than a year later. But even in his confession, he insisted Melissa Evans had never mattered. "I never loved her," he whispered hoarsely. "I only ever loved you." He fell to his knees, pulling a small box from his pocket, and when he opened it, a diamond caught the light. "This stone," he said with desperation burning in his voice, "I mined it myself. The engraving I carved with my own hands into the shape of a rose with thorns. From the first moment I saw you, I knew you were that rose, beautiful, untouchable, impossible to forget. Hannah, you are my only diamond, my rarest treasure, my forever. In another life, I would have longed for a proposal like this, but now I only saw the truth. That diamond was meaningless. The last time he had slipped a ring onto my hand, it had been a recycled trinket, meant for a client, a placeholder for feelings that had already decayed. My voice was like ice. "Jonathan King, there are no more chances." The sirens came first, then the pounding on the doors. The front of the abandoned mansion exploded open, and Tucson police stormed in, throwing him to the ground. The ring slipped from his trembling hand and clattered across the dusty floor, spinning in a useless circle before coming to rest. I didn't spare it a glance. Ever since I came back from the dead, I had installed an emergency beacon in my phone, a silent alarm I had pressed the moment he snapped. This time I was ready. They pinned him, cuffed him, dragged him up as he screamed my name, his voice torn with desperation. I stood silently shaking as the ropes fell from my wrists and whispered words he would never hear over the chaos. Goodbye. Forever. 2 months later, already in Arizona, on my exchange program, a call came. An old friend's voice trembled on the other end. Jonathan King was dying, his body collapsing under multiple organ failure. Melissa Evans had stabbed him again and again in a frenzy of madness. After her father had sold her to a 50-year-old bachelor in their rural hometown, after the man beat her mercilessly and paraded her like property she had escaped, and come begging Jonathan for rescue. She waited outside the police station in Phoenix, terrified, sick, still clinging to the delusion that he might come for her. But when he saw her, he only looked with disgust. "This is the police station. Go inside if you have a problem. I'm not here to save you," she begged, but he only shook his head. He had already called her father, already decided she should go back and disappear. That final rejection broke her mind. She pulled a knife she had hidden and drove it into him again and again, her screams a twisted prayer. "I loved you in the last life. I tried to reach you sooner in this one. You promised if you had met me first, you would have chosen me. And still you ruined me." By the time the police dragged her off him, she was raving like the mad woman she had become. The courts would later declare her insane and lock her away in a psychiatric hospital, but the damage was done. Jonathan was finished. When the news reached me, I felt nothing but a chill emptiness. "How pathetic," I murmured and hung up the phone. I strapped on my helmet, started my motorcycle, and sped into the Arizona mountains. The summer wind tore across my face, hot and wild, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Hannah Brooks reborn. No longer bound to the chains of a man's obsession or the shadow of betrayal. My life was only just beginning, and the road ahead was wide open, glittering with possibilities. Ride forward, always forward. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.